we can start looking at how this will come to life.
Okay. And so one of my thoughts, I should explain how what you're doing here is a little different than the way that I may receive a script from
Hmm.
another writer. And so the way you're doing this is actually it's interesting. This is new for me. I quite enjoy it because it's giving me a different sense of how to approach this character. So in many cases, the writer may send me character descriptions, and the character's descriptions will be more on the visual side of it. This is more of like an emotional beat. It's more of like
Hmm.
a sense of what the page is going to be like. And so for me, what I'm thinking about is how do I translate that into some actions the character is going to go through on the page, and therefore it's giving me like with that first one, it's like what is that? That's so their
Hmm.
stance is going to be a little bit more on the quixotic side. They're not necessarily going to be doing anything that's really big. They
Hmm.
just may be standing, and maybe that their heads kind of they're looking at it and their head is like
Yeah.
tilted to the side a little bit. They're
Hmm.
going, I what? Maybe their hand is, like that's kind of what I'm getting. And
Hmm.
so what I'm doing here is I am just going with what how I feel, the emotional sense I'm getting from this, from the description you're
Hmm.
giving me.
And
And
it's funny that you brought that up because I approach this differently than I normally would. For me, it was more about figuring out that sort of feel of each page that would move us through it, right? So as opposed to being so strict in terms of the action or what was happening, it was more this is what this page is accomplishing, right? And then letting you
yeah,
interpret that into a visual versus it being overly prescriptive. Because there's so many ways we can do these things, but these things need to happen in order to get to the next stage of the story.
yeah. And for anybody who is trying to replicate this in a way that makes sense for them, you could, because we're doing this in a very organic way where we're going back and forth and feeding off of each other's ideas.
Mhm,
So which may not necessarily be the case if again if you're working by yourself or if you have somebody who's written something already. So this is a different way of approaching things in
mhm,
that really we are in some ways going kind of blind, right? Like I'm not exactly that. This is the first time I've seen this, so I haven't
mhm,
really had the opportunity to think about it. So I'm going with what's really immediate in my mind,
mhm,
even though I know generally how the story is gonna be, I'm still going with just this the gut feeling, my experience, how I
mhm,
feel this character would emote. It may or may not work, I don't know, and I'm drawing this in a very rough way, gestural way so that
mhm,
I'm not thinking too much about the, uh, like the making it look, like, technically correct. Maybe the arm may be a little bit too long or the way that they're, standing, the feet may not be exact, right? But I'm just trying to get, like, an immediate emotional sense from it.
and that's an interesting, observation as well, is that there is something to be said for having an immediate emotional reaction because that is how people read stuff, right? That is how people look at art is they don't get time to pre-think about it and digest it. It's immediately how do they feel? What do they see? So it is a neat exercise to do something like this and not give yourself days and weeks to ponder over something and to just like, where does my mind immediately go and how am I going to represent that? And to just sort
Mhm.
of see the feeling and letting that come through. And this is that type of story as well. This is that type of story that is really about feel versus heavy plot and dialogue, right? So this does lend
Yeah.
itself to this style more than other types of stories will.
Yeah, so what would you what like, how did you come upon doing it this way? Like, what was your thinking with that?
So my thinking with it was a little bit of I really wanted to find a way to make it a true collaboration, right? So I wanted to leave it open-ended as much as possible so that you could interpret it versus coming in with it very clean cut. Here's the answer. Here's what I want you to execute. I also, because this story is really visually driven, right? Like we talked about from the get go, this one really is that, feel it in the pit of your stomach, gut kind of a story. I wanted to kind of keep it at that emotional level. And then once we sort of got each page down, then really figure out the beat by beat frames for it in order to really execute it plot wise. But this one just felt like it needed emotion before plot to then figure out the little things that needed to happen to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. We were doing things a little bit different than we may do in other situations, but that's what makes us really kind of fun is
Mhm.
that we're trying to unlock our imagination in a way where it may be just more organic, and
Mhm.
it because of this process, doing it this way where you're breaking it down in this just describing the emotional
Mhm.
uh, beat of the story really makes for me at least it just it's kind of it's thrilling, right? It makes it a lot more. It's like I'm on the seat of my pants. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. I didn't really have any idea going in, other than
Yeah.
I had kind of decided I think what the clothing would be, but otherwise I really didn't have any idea like what I was going to be doing
Mhm.
exactly for this first page. Or although, I mean, in some ways you kind of figure we're building up to something. It doesn't start
Yeah.
off as like the person in panic mode. So I wouldn't have necessarily thought the character would be in a very like type of
Yeah, I mean, this does follow it really does follow where we've been and where we planned on going. It's just providing it to you in a slightly different way of explaining it, right? Like, it's sort of what we've
yeah.
talked about from the beginning of that, phone a friend moment of what's going on, that searching for answers, all those things. It's just putting the emotion as the leader versus the specifics of the action. So letting the emotion lead the story. And as we kind of talked about as well, depending on which story we had picked in episode 1, that probably would have changed how we approached it as well. Because depending on the type of story we were doing, we would have approached it slightly differently, but because this one is such a, psychological thriller, it kinda needed a slightly different approach.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And I think that's you have to be creative with this stuff. Like
Mhm,
it's if you are starting this journey where you've never done anything like this at all, like then this may be a very different way from anything you'd ever thought of doing because or you may not know any different, I should say. You may not
mhm,
even know that this is a kind of different way of doing it. This may feel very natural to you if you're trying it
mhm,
this way. And you're like, yeah, my sensibility kind of works along this line too. So I'm going to do this, and I may do this with every single uh, you know, story I do, which is
mhm,
first I'm going to just like brainstorm ideas, write down like a single sentence, and then from there I'm going to break it down by the emotional beats per page,
mhm,
which I think there's something great to trying it that way. And for those of you that are watching this going, uh, I've never even thought about doing it this way because I personally haven't really thought about doing it this way. Mine has been a little bit more traditional, which is the writer and I will have a conversation, and then the writer will come back with a script, and then
mhm,
that script is usually a guideline for me to follow. Where this is a more organic process,
mhm,
so breaking it up in this way is actually it's approaching it in a different way that is going to eventually get us to the same conclusion by the end of the story. But
mhm.
it's kind of shaking it up so that we can, like who knows what's going to come from this that I may never have done before because of it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know how to do everything by the book, by the letter, by the
Mm,
rules, and then it's also important to realize that those are more guidelines, right? So you wanna
yeah.
make sure that you properly establish characters, you wanna make sure that you know where your story's going, you know your plot, you know your ending, all of those things. You can't skip them, but there's also lots of ways to get to the end result, like you were just saying, right? Like there's many roads that you can take, and this is a slightly different one. And I think it's important as a creative person to be creative in all aspects of what you do and don't get so locked into formulas of this is how I must create because you might actually miss out on something neat because you didn't try that way. So be willing to sort of try a slightly different approach and see where it takes you.
Yeah, that's right. And that is a very good point that you have to know what the rules are to be able to
Mhm.
break them. We're
Yeah.
providing all those rules. We're just doing it in a slightly different
Yeah.
way, right? So you still have to be able to tell what the story is in a single line, which is like a pitch, right?
Mhm.
That's what we call an elevator pitch, be able to describe in a single line. And then from that develop it into more of a story with an outline, right?
Mhm.
Which this is a very it's this is kind of like an outline, and
Yeah.
alongside of that, you're also going to be developing the character in the world. Like, what does it look like?
Mhm.
How's the character going to behave? And then the next step is going to be what we're going to be doing, in a subsequent episode, which is developing each page a bit more, right?
Yeah.
So we are going to be taking you along in a way that it is the rules. It just we're not doing it in like a traditional sense,
Mhm.
which may be more familiar to most people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think if you've done this long enough, as we both have, you've done it the traditional way more times than you can count, and you've also found other
Mhm.
ways that give interesting results that are a lot of fun to do, and this is kind of one of those ways. So, especially if you're working with somebody else, um, challenging each other in this way is also really good, right? So that it's not always so prescriptive one way back and forth that you just end up getting stuck in like this is just how I do things versus is this the best work I could do? I don't know because this is just how I do things, right? Where we're giving each other the opportunity to kind of push it and be like, you know, in the spur of the moment, here, I'm giving you this thing. What are you going to do with it? And already I can see we're getting some really neat things instantly out of you.
Yeah, so I moved on to 2, which is
Hmm.
avoidance and control. The purpose is to show denial through action, emotional beat. If I can't remove it, I can at least ignore it. So I'm almost like in this way, I'm thinking, okay, this person is now kind of looking over their shoulder at it, like,
Hmm.
I'm going to do other things. I'm feeling confident enough that I'm going to do something else, but at the same time, the thing is kind of like calling to me, and so
Yeah.
it's a little bit like a paranoia starting to set in. It's like I'm going to try to ignore this by arranging my books, and but there's something there's a door there, and what is
It's
that
like the
door there
more
for?
they try to ignore it, the more it becomes bigger, right? Like, it's like that
Yeah,
elephant in the room feeling. The more they go out of their way to not notice it, the more it becomes obvious, which I think is really interesting. Like, it's working the opposite way, and the character just starting that anxiety starting to kinda creep in of, "Nope, I don't need to pay attention to this," but really, that's all they can think about.
yeah. Well, that's it. That's so. What is it? What does that look like? It's kind of like maybe you're sitting down at the table, and then you just stop what you're doing to look at it, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's taking on some mundane tasks, but in the midst of that mundane, you can't focus because it keeps on calling to you,
Yeah, I
right?
liked
And
what
that
we had talked about. I think it was back in episode 1 with the idea that it's even like, turning off the TV and you see the reflection of the door in the TV. So even like, trying to watch TV, like just get my brain away from it and you still see that reflection of the door there. Like no matter what they do, it's just in everything. It's all that they can focus on in that entire space.
yeah, that's right. We'll have to uh, think of like how that's going to look when we break it down by panels. Like how can we use
Exactly.
that?
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, that's actually a good one to. So it's all in this case. I'd just be like blocking,
Mhm.
trying to figure out uh, how to make it so you have a TV there that maybe they don't even have a lot of furniture, so it's like on books or something,
Yeah.
and they're sitting on the ground and the reflection of the door. is there.
Yeah, that already like, already just with these few simple sketches, you can already feel the vibe change from 1 to 2, right? Like, you can feel that, like, "I'm new here, just moving in. This is weird, but I'll live with it," to 2, you can already feel the tension and "I'm trying not to pay attention, but this is not right." So
Yeah, and that's right. There's a little bit more of like a, um, whimsy for the first one. I guess, "Oh, what
mhm,
is that?" It's
yeah,
and now they're gonna be like, "Oh, how what I
yeah.
really having
Why
a
is
hard
that
time ignoring it now."
exactly,
Right?
exactly.